watching CBS News' continuing coverage of Showdown in the Gulf. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here are Harry Smith and Paula Zahn.
And good morning, everybody. I guess it's hard to figure out who's going to be on the shift because we're changing throughout the night. Welcome back to our special coverage of Operation Desert Storm. I'm Paula Zahn.
And I'm Harry Smith, and here are the Persian Gulf headlines this morning. 2 more American planes down. Israel looks for an answer to an Iraqi missile attack. Moscow denounces the attack as a dangerous turn, and Allied ground forces are on the move in Saudi Arabia. There are 2 more American planes down in the Gulf War. One is identified as an Air Force F-15E Strike Eagle carrying 2 crewmen. The other is a Navy attack plane, an A-6 Intruder, also a 2-man aircraft. Both crews are listed as missing. In Israel, the cabinet has ended an emergency session this morning in Jerusalem. They met to decide on a response to an Iraqi Scud missile attack. At least 8 missiles hit Haifa, Tel Aviv, and other coastal areas. They did not carry chemical weapons, but their conventional warheads did considerable damage. 10 people were hurt, none killed. American officials are urging a cautious response from Israel, but the Soviet Union has denounced the Iraqi attack as a dangerous turn in the Gulf War. Allied planes continue their round-the-clock attacks on targets in Iraq and Kuwait. But planes are not the only weapons in the air war. Tomahawk cruise missiles have been used since the very beginning, their first use in combat. The Pentagon is pleased with the results, and are so the sailors aboard the battleship Wisconsin who launched the missiles.
We are certainly prepared to continue the fight, and that is why I think we very carefully built up the forces in theater and put them in place such that when we were ready to go, we were ready to continue the fight and take the fight to its natural conclusion.
In Saudi Arabia this morning, there are signs that the Allies are preparing for a ground war. Trucks and armor are now moving in convoy toward the Kuwaiti border. In this country, the protests continue. One at a basketball game in Missoula, Montana, brought a response from the crowd. The protesters delayed the start of the game for about 5 minutes, and that for right now is the headlines.
And to find out more about that troop movement along the Kuwaiti border right now, we go to Scott Pelley, who's standing by in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. Good morning, Scott. What can you tell us?
Good morning, Paula. This morning we are at an air base in eastern Saudi Arabia, and we have been watching all morning as U.S. Air Force F-15 Eagles have been leaving here, apparently inbound to Kuwait and Iraq. The aerial bombardment of Kuwait and Iraq continues at this hour. As for those troops that you mentioned, Paula, we saw it yesterday. Hundreds of U.S. tanks, armored personnel carriers, and other equipment massing on the Kuwaiti border. This was in conjunction with British forces. Long convoys of fuel trucks and ammunition trucks were headed into the area. It is not known when those troops may be moving north. Let's speak for a moment about U.S. air losses at this moment. Overnight, the United States lost 2 more aircraft. 4 crewmen are missing. The first, a U.S. Air Force F-15E Strike Eagle, top-of-the-line aircraft, apparently downed during a mission over Iraq or Kuwait. 2 men listed as missing. The other aircraft, a Navy A-6 Intruder, a bomber that would have been launched from one of the 6 aircraft carrier battle groups in the region. 2 men aboard that aircraft also listed as missing. And finally, the first aircraft lost in the air war against Iraq, an FA-18, 1 man aboard that aircraft listed as missing. There was a Scud missile attack here in Saudi Arabia last night at about the same time as the attack in Israel. We have videotape now of an American Patriot missile knocking down the incoming Iraqi Scud missile. You see the orange streak rising into the sky, and just above the cloud layer, the Patriot missile impacts the Scud and brings it down. Standing here last night during that air raid, we could hear the Patriot missile take off, and only about a second and a half later, a loud bang and concussion as that Scud missile was brought down. It was the first time the U.S. Patriot missile system had ever been used in combat, and it scored a direct hit. Also this morning, the aerial bombardment continues from the sea. In the Persian Gulf, the battleship USS Wisconsin continued firing salvos of Tomahawk cruise missiles. These are the super accurate missiles aimed at Kuwait and Iraq that are taking out high priority targets such as the anti-aircraft systems that have been used to some effect to bring down American aircraft so far. Paula?
Scott, can you give us a better sense of the distances these troops are going to have to travel, those that are heading north now to the Kuwaiti border?
Not very far at all, Paula. We were taking a trip, if you will, along the Kuwaiti-Saudi border yesterday. Me and a CBS crew went about 200 miles along the border and saw U.S. forces massed about 40 miles from the border. It would be a very quick trip indeed to bring an armored thrust into southern Kuwait.
Scott Pelley reporting from Saudi Arabia and Dhahran, Saudi Arabia this morning. Thank you very much. Right now we're going to go to Wyatt Andrews, who's standing by at the White House with the latest from Washington. Good morning, Wyatt.
Paula, good morning. With reference to the attacks last night by Iraq on Israel with the 8 to 10 Scud missiles that hit throughout Israel, the White House was engaged throughout the night in a furious diplomatic effort to try to assure the Israelis that strictly from a military point of view, the U.S. would be doing what it could to act in Israel's self-defense. The obvious implication there is a clear effort to persuade the Israelis that restraint now is in Israel's best interest, and that from a military point of view, the U.S. could answer the Scud attack. Even the public hints coming from the White House overnight were huge, with the White House saying in written statements that the Allies would continue their efforts to eliminate the threat, quote unquote, and that the United States is attacking those missile sites and other targets in Iraq. The concern, Paula, is obvious that Israel could, and that Israel knows this for itself, that Israel would only be playing into Saddam Hussein's hands if it made a very huge showing or a non-commensurate response to what happened last night. It would only play into what Saddam is obviously attempting, and that is to portray himself as the champion of the Palestinians. There's no doubt that Israel itself knows that's exactly what's going on, and the United States, while falling short of asking Israel never to defend itself, is obviously asking Israel to weigh this very carefully.
But if Shamir caves in to pressure from the right in his party and it does decide to retaliate, how is this going to change the stakes of the war?
Well, that, Paula, depends completely on what Israel does. Even from the Syrians, and on the record from the Egyptians, if Israel retaliates in kind, I believe the word that I've consistently heard is commensurate. Will the retaliation be commensurate? Then the jury will really be out as to whether Israel would damage, quote unquote, the coalition. If Israel were to go for some massive retaliation, take on Baghdad, go for Saddam himself, that's the situation in which the Egyptians and Syrians might be given pause in their contributions to the coalition.
Are we getting any better information now on just what the coordination will be in the coming days between Israel and the United States?
Paula, to be perfectly honest, no. I think that we've been in a situation over the last few days where the Israeli public complaints that they had no coordination with Washington being so loud. I think that in some cases you might even suspect that. It's very hard to believe that there would be no coordination. And I think it's clear from the activity around from the White House last night that the coordination last night, at least, was significantly stepped up.
Wyatt Andrews, thanks so much from the White House this morning. Harry?
Paula, we want to talk with a couple of veterans, one a Vietnam veteran and one a Korean War veteran who are involved in Veterans Affairs. And before we talk about what you all do with regard to that, I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of your own personal reactions and how you've been responding as you saw the beginning of the battle take place, and what is that like for you to see another war start? Let me start first with Gene Gittleson, who's a Vietnam War veteran. We're also joined by Eddie Thompson, who's a Korean War veteran. Gene, let's start with you.
It stirs memories because young men and women, young men like myself, 20 years ago, going into combat, the uncertainty of the situation, and It also brings back the memories that we very much prepare people for war. We're very good at putting people through basic training and advanced individual training through all our wars, but we're not very good in preparing people to come home. And the thoughts that I had was, what's going to happen? Is it going to be like Vietnam? Is it going to be like Korea in coming home?
Because you're involved with a Veterans Leadership Project here in New York City. And isn't that part of what that's all about, is to help people continue in their adjustment even all these almost 20 years later?
Yes. In fact, right now we have over 900 Vietnam veterans on the waiting list who are still waiting to get back into the economic mainstream. We haven't finished the job for that war, and now we have other soldiers who at some point are going to be coming home. And have we learned, or is it collective amnesia again when soldiers come home?
Eddie, what was your personal response as this war started?
Well, not much different than what Gene was saying. I had some old feelings and thoughts and remembered, or I'm getting ready to go into another battle. I didn't want to see this happen, but if we are into it, I said, let us win this one the right way, or let us have a lot of respect for our guys and girls when they come home. And the other thing is, are we prepared when it's over? I think some thought should go into it about when our men and women come home, what the future will hold for them, definitely emotionally and job-wise. And I deal with a lot of vets in the program that I work for, which is a substance abuse program. And I see all the emotional traumas.
Do you think that the nation is better prepared for this war, or at least initially? I mean, we see the poll numbers that there's so much support for the president, and even amongst protesters, you're hearing people say, we support the men and women who are fighting over there. We may disagree with the policy, but we support the men and women who are fighting over there. That's a big difference from 20 years ago.
It's a very big difference, because what we found did not happen when we came home was the war was not separated from
the people who fought.
From the people who fought. And it's been a problem throughout history, from the Civil War, World War I to Korea and Vietnam. And the question is whether the past is prologue, or whether we have really learned that when we put people into combat, soldiers don't make war. They conduct the foreign policy of the nation, and we've got to remember that.
Eddie, do you see, as you listen to the families of servicemen and women over there, though, they seem to be coping well? As we've seen interview after interview after interview, as well as these military people seem to be prepared. I also see a different kind of preparedness from the families.
Yes, and a lot more support for the families. I see, and I hope that will continue, and young children also of these guys and the women, and but still, to go back, I just hope we have learned the lesson in the support of our people when they come back.
In your substance abuse program and your support program to get people more involved in the economic mainstream, of the veterans that you've been in contact with over the last 48 hours or so, has this been especially traumatic for some?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eddie.
Yeah, I see it with the people that I work with, and the people that we are treating in the program. A lot of trauma was there, a lot of emotions came about, and a lot of the people where I work at have relatives there, brothers, sisters, or children, their own child, and we have a lot of discussions around it.
Yeah. They must be feeling it especially intensely.
Yeah, what we see, Terry, I mean, wars produce stress reactions. It's not unusual. It is not pop psychology. It is a reality, whether it's hurricanes. The question is, what are we going to do about it? And since time does not necessarily heal those wounds, talking about it, working on it, acceptance, coming to terms with it does. And whether it's 20 years or 1 year, we have got to learn to allow the people that come back to talk about it, to accept that.
And I think it's through work of gentlemen like you that the country's awareness is a lot higher. Gene, Eddie, thank you very much for coming in this morning. I do appreciate it.
Okay.
And our coverage of Desert Storm will continue right after this. I guess we're not going to take a break after all. I'm going to bring you up to date on the headlines in the Persian Gulf War. 2 more U.S. jet fighters are down. The Israeli cabinet concludes debate following an Iraqi missile attack. The U.S.-led air assault continues on targets both in Iraq and Kuwait. And the commander of Operation Desert Storm will brief reporters about 1 hour from now. Details are sketchy, but 2 more U.S. jet fighters are reported down in action. One is a Navy A-6 Intruder. No official word on the fate of its 2 crewmen. The other missing jet is an Air Force F-15E Strike Eagle. Its 2-man crew is also unaccounted for. The Israeli cabinet has concluded a lengthy emergency meeting called to formulate a response to last night's Iraqi missile attack. No decision has been announced. At least 8 conventionally armed Iraqi Scud missiles hit Israeli civilian targets, 5 in the city of Tel Aviv, causing damage and injuries, but fortunately no deaths. Shortly after the missile strikes, the mayor of Tel Aviv surveyed the wreckage.
My feeling is, look, I mean, war is not a summer camp, and to my sorrow, people were wounded. We are taking care of the families, of the babies, of the children. I went to, because the people are now they were concentrated in 2 shelters, in a school and in another place. I went to calm them down, to speak with them, to tell them that we will take care of them. We'll evacuate them from here, we'll give them housing, and we will continue to live and to enjoy life.
In the Iraqi capital of Baghdad, all appears quiet this morning. Some street traffic is visible in some of the most recent pictures we've been sent. That's in stark contrast to the battle that lighted up the Baghdad skies Wednesday night. These spectacular pictures were smuggled out of Iraq by a British ITN cameraman. And Harry, I can't imagine what he was thinking as that was unfolding and his camera was rolling.
We are going to get a little bit more military analysis now, and once again we're joined by CBS News correspondent, 60 Minutes correspondent Morley Saber. Good morning, Morley.
Thank you, Harry. More Tomahawk cruise missiles were launched by U.S. warships at Iraqi targets in Basra last night. Desert Storm is war like it's never been fought before, using weapons that were never tested in battle. It's kind of Star Wars for real. To get an idea of its like, we have some quite fascinating footage of last night's launching of a cruise Tomahawk missile from the Wisconsin. Well, we will have some fascinating footage of a cruise from Wisconsin. David Aarons, a cruise missile, never before used in anger. What's its brain like? How does it know where to go?
Well, it really has 3 different components. One is a sort of inertial guidance system where that's similar to a number of inertial systems that are in commercial aircraft and so forth. Then it has what is called contour radar mapping. In other words, it goes along and it has in its brain a map of what the contour of the land is as it heads towards its target, and it keeps taking measurements to know where it's supposed to be. Then in its final phase, it actually has a picture in its electronic brain of what the target is supposed to look like.
So what you're saying, if they're launching one from Wisconsin, say, to hit the defense ministry in Baghdad, theoretically, somebody's programmed into it that roadmap to Baghdad, to the defense ministry in Baghdad.
It's even more than a roadmap. It's like a scale model, if you will, of what the whole land and the territory is between its launch point and when it arrives. And it actually has a picture of the defense ministry. The one that struck that could well have had a TV camera in it that would match the actual picture of the ministry with the picture in its electronic brain. It's able to land after traveling more than 600 miles. It's able to land within 10 yards. So it's an extremely accurate and impressive system.
Let me interrupt because we do have the tape now of that launching from Wisconsin last night.
This is Bravo, direct.
ECO, time until launch, 1 minute.
1 minute to launch.
1 minute, sir.
ABL-1, unlocked.
Battle ready as possible.
You might be unable to support boarding until the earliest morning of the 19th.
ABL-1, elevating.
Alert acknowledged. Direct Command ship's closer. Execute plan 10. 5.
Okay, Yankee Mike. Okay, again.
4, 3, 2, 1, launch.
Missile away!
Yes, sir.
Good job. Well, we're going to need to do a LHD reload.
Well, I think you earned a few bragging rights. There's 2 aircraft in there, and there's 3 missiles in between. This is ours.
It's fascinating looking at modern warfare. None of those, great artillery barrage, great cannon barrages from ships offshore. It's this.
I think one of the most impressive things about this whole thing is that with all of those missiles, we've had to take radar pictures of the entire country of Iraq. We've had to get these pictures of the targets. We've had to get them into the specific missile systems' brains. And this has been an intelligence and coordination effort of enormous magnitude.
You know, over the years, we've all done wonderful stories about weapons that don't work, excessive overruns for weapons that don't work. Here in the last 2 days, we've had 2 absolutely new weapons, never used before, that actually work, the Patriot and the Cruise. You think the military-industrial complex is cheering this morning?
Well, you know, there have always been a lot of very good people out there working very hard and doing a good job for the country. It's also instructive that both of these programs have been pretty successful all the way along. In other words, they've not been troubled programs that required, that had massive cost overruns. They're very expensive weapon systems, but the programs have gone ahead on schedule. They haven't been like some of the programs that, for example, Dick Cheney just canceled a few weeks ago.
Well, it was proven yesterday that a Scud is easy to knock down with a Patriot. How easy is it to knock down a Tomahawk?
Well, it wouldn't be all that difficult. If you had a Patriot on the other end, you could intercept a Tomahawk the way that we intercepted the Scud. In fact, I think it's fair to say that it might even be easier because it doesn't fly. It's not a ballistic system. It's really a winged aircraft, a pilotless aircraft. And the possibility of intercepting it and shooting it down is very real.
It also doesn't go in a straight line, though.
No, it maneuvers and it can do various things. But essentially, it's, you know, like the old V-1 buzz bomb and can be shot down by anti-aircraft.
Thank you, David.
Morley, thank you. CBS continuous coverage of Operation Desert Storm continues in a moment.
We're now hearing that the Pentagon is taking in some 10,000 calls an hour from family members wanting to know the latest information. And right now we go to Bob Faw for some domestic reaction to the news of the last 24 hours. Good morning,
24
Bob.
going on 36, Paul. The war, you know, reveals the deepest and often the truest emotions of a nation, noble as well as base. One way to get a sense of what's going on is to spend a few minutes with a family living through the war, in this case with a proud but worried father at home and a son who's on the front lines. His name is Lieutenant Colonel Mike Hostage. He's 35 years old. He's now a fighter pilot on duty in Saudi Arabia. He's the product of an all-American life, glory on the gridiron, golden moments in the sun, the happy marriage, the smiling wife. Mike Hostage's nickname now is Hijack, and while he flies over Baghdad, his father at home outside Boston tries to stay calm.
As Mike describes his job, he is the point of the spear. His job is to be out front in the attack.
Yeah, we were expecting to see air activity, being daylight and such, but I was kind of surprised that there wasn't any.
I said something as we were saying goodbye. I said, "Be careful, and I love you." And he said, "I'll be careful, I love you too, and don't forget that I'm very good at what I do, and I'll be very careful."
Well, I've been training for 13 years for this day. It's like being a professional athlete and never playing a game. Today was the first game, and the enemy didn't show up. The opponent didn't show up. We went out there and ran our first play, and it worked great. Scored a touchdown. There was nobody home.
Unfortunately, it isn't over. It's begun. And for as long as they're there, I'm told he'll fly 2 missions a day. And you just have to worry each day.
Think the war's over?
I would not be surprised. If he had a half a brain, he'd quit before we do him any more damage. I would not be surprised at all if it ended quickly.
The war, mostly at this point, a question of tactics and ordnance, but the war is essentially about human beings, as that shows very clearly. Harry? Paul?
Bob, a little bit earlier this morning I saw you on with Charles Osgood, and you were talking about some poll numbers that I have a copy of, too. And one wonders about how the country responds, and that's one family's response. And the numbers are overwhelming in their support for the president and for support for the policy.
3 of 4, Harry, nearly 78%, wholeheartedly endorse what the president has done. But keep in mind, that happens every time this country goes to war, at least in the art of polling that happens. It happened with Grenada, it happened with Panama, it happened even after the Libyan jets were shot out of the sky, the tendency to rally behind the president. The question here is when the body bags come home, when the cost goes up and the apparent cost is clear to everyone, do those numbers stay as high? Korea, 2 years after the conflict began there, those numbers plunged 40%. Same thing happened in Vietnam, only faster. So this is early. This is the best they will get. The president now, according to the poll numbers, the CBS New York Times poll, is almost at his record high level. Mm-hmm. Will it stand up? Will the family we just talked to feel the same way a month from now? That's the key question.
When was this polling done?
It's on the 17th of January. So before the Israeli attack, the attack that is on Tel Aviv, which some people think has hardened attitudes already, but still, this is the early glow, this is the first round, and this is what, at this point, is reflected in that poll.
The numbers it really stand up all the way through, too, as I've got a copy of the poll in front of me. Do you approve or disapprove of the way George Bush is handling Iraq's invasion of Kuwait? 85%. Do you think the United States did the right thing in starting military actions against Iraq? 78%. And these match up dramatically with same questions that were asked 10 or so days before. I mean, there are jumps, dramatic leaps of 20, 25, even 30%.
Again, keep in mind two things. The poll also shows that most Americans, about 36%, do not think this conflict will drag on more than a couple of months. Earlier in January, that figure was about 24%. So there is a feeling this is going to be over quickly, and that's reflected in the poll. Keep in mind also that there's a gender gap in this poll. By a margin of a ratio of about 2 to 1, men who were polled said, go into Iraq, bomb the targets regardless of where civilians are. Only 41% of the women polled felt that way.
Dude, I haven't had a chance, and these things get to be unbelievably complex and go page after page after page. And I'm wondering if there is also a generation gap. In some of the early indications, they're really, the older the American, the more supportive of the president and the policy, and the younger, just the opposite.
Yeah, and that's, again, a traditional historical pattern, which tends to hold up. That support tends to hold up over time for the administration, whereas the younger support, which presumably bears a greater brunt, tends to fall off. Again, it's just too early. The point I think we can make is that the overall rating now for what the president has done is probably, if past polls are any guide, is probably as high as it's going to go.
The other thing I'm curious about is this is all taken this is the initial blush, and especially through the success of the early hours of the campaign. It is so much more infinitely complex now after the Scud missiles landed in Israel last night. And we're all sort of waiting on the edges of our collective seats to find out what the Israeli cabinet decides to do with regard to some sort of retaliation or not.
Do you suspect as a result of the attacks now on Israel that we will see these numbers go even higher?
Well, I think there's some sign already, given the reaction around the country in the last several hours to what has happened in Tel Aviv. The sense of outrage and indignation seems to be building, even though people knew it could happen. This is the finality of it has solidified support already. The question is whether that initial blush will carry over. And I think that's an open question right now. It's a broad base of support, but at the same time, one could say it's also thin. Sounds contradictory there, didn't it?
Bob Falk, thanks very much for joining us this morning, and we'll be getting back to Bob, I'm sure, with more information throughout this morning as our continuous coverage of Operation Desert Storm continues.
And good morning. Welcome back to our special coverage of Operation Desert Storm. I'm Paula Zahn.
And I'm Harry Smith.
Time to bring you up to date on the latest headlines right now. 2 more U.S. jets downed in the air war with Iraq. Israel's cabinet debates an answer to an Iraqi missile attack. The PLO says the Iraqi attack puts Israel in the war. And the U.S. commander in the Gulf prepares his first briefing for reporters since Desert Storm began. Officials in the Persian Gulf confirmed this morning that there are now 3 American planes down in the Gulf conflict. The latest losses: an Air Force F-15E, known as a Strike Eagle, with a crew of 2, and a Navy attack plane, an A-6 Intruder, also carrying a 2-man crew. Both crews are reported missing. That's about all we know at this point. The first plane lost in the initial wave of attacks was a Navy F-18. Its pilot, Navy Lieutenant Commander Michael Spicer, is officially listed as missing. In the skies over Israel, warplanes are on the alert after an Iraqi missile attack. They have not yet been ordered to do anything that we know of. Like the rest of the world, they're waiting to hear what the Israeli cabinet decided at an emergency session this morning in Jerusalem. The Iraqi Scud missile did not carry chemical warheads, but they did a great deal of damage. At least 10 people were hurt, none killed. In this country, the Israelis are being asked to show restraint in answering Iraq.
If the Israelis respond, put considerable strain on the coalition. I think that may have been the back of everyone's mind when you listen to Saddam Hussein over the past 3 or 4 months.
The Palestine Liberation Organization is saying that the Iraqi attack means Israel is now in the war. But the Soviets have deplored the attack, calling it a dangerous turn in the Gulf conflict. Meanwhile, Tomahawk missiles launched from U.S. warships in the Persian Gulf have continued to form an important part of the air assault against Iraq. Officials say that from the very first night of the war, the Tomahawks have played an effective role in hitting targets with pinpoint accuracy. And coming up in just about half an hour, the U.S. commander in the Gulf, General Norman Schwarzkopf, is expected to hold his first briefing since the fighting started. And we, of course, will bring that to you live as it happens.
In the meantime, we want to check in with Pentagon correspondent Jim Stewart, who is standing by down in Washington right now. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Harry. As you and Paul have been reporting now, the Pentagon is confirming those 3 aircraft losses. They are not comfortable, however, talking about other Allied losses, and apparently there have been some. Unconfirmed reports indicate 3, possibly as many as 4 Allied aircraft, but the Pentagon just has always been reluctant to talk about that and has not done so again this morning. Now, battle damage assessment reports are now becoming available to some senior officials here in the Pentagon. Those, of course, have been viewed very closely in Saudi Arabia already. And I'm getting the feeling here that they're just as pleased as the officials in Saudi Arabia are. However, they point out that some of these Scud missile sites, some of the fixed Scud missile sites, may not have been totally destroyed. Now, that's a possibility they raise that would indicate the naval aircraft, especially off the carriers in the Red Sea, would be going back in on a 3rd, now possibly 4th strike today to try and eliminate. The possibility was raised that they cannot confirm even that those Scud attacks on Israel came from mobile sites. Some possibly came from fixed sites that were not totally destroyed in the first wave of attacks. No confirmation of here on that yet, but that is a strong possibility some have suggested here. Harry?
Jim, I think it's important to remember the cautionary tone that was set by the Defense Secretary yesterday, and that really almost sounds like prophecy in retrospect. There are some 10,000 calls that are coming in every hour to the Department of Defense, to the Pentagon, family members wanting to know how their loved ones are faring there in the Middle East. Have they indicated to you at all how they're handling all of these calls, and whether or not they're able to divvy out any information to these people who want to know how their loved ones are doing?
Well, you're quite right here. A cautionary tone in the sense that there could be additional losses of personnel, and cautionary in terms of how successful some of these raids have been. In terms of how they're handling these calls, all of the services have put in individual command rooms in which they're trying to handle as many calls as they can. The Army was inundated, absolutely inundated, according to the telephone company. Thousands of calls coming in an hour. They could handle only a few hundred. Some asking as simple a question as, how is my son Joe? And to each the answer has been pretty much what the Pentagon has been saying all along, and that is that the assault has started. There is no firm information, and certainly none about individuals as yet. However, that will be the contact point for many of these families as the days goes on and ground troops eventually become involved.
All right, Jim Stewart at the Pentagon. We'll, of course, keep that line open. And a little bit later on, we're talking about 25 minutes or so from now, we're going to hear from General Schwarzkopf, who is going to hold a debriefing and an interview session, or at least a press availability, where we're going to be able to find out a lot more on a very direct sense of what has transpired thus far, direct from Saudi Arabia in Operation Desert Storm. We want to go to Amman, Jordan right now and check in with CBS News correspondent Doug Tennell. Doug, how are things looking from your perspective this morning?
The Jordanian parliament has called for an emergency session later today, Harry. The events of the last 12 hours, the Iraqi missile attack on Israel, have raised the nightmare scenario as a prospect once again. The scenario here in which Jordan could be drawn into a war completely against its will. At dawn today, Amman was calm, but only just. The prospect of Israel using Jordanian airspace as a corridor to Iraq has Jordanians feeling more vulnerable than ever and more fearful that events could still run out of anyone's control. King Hussein's top priority is to stay out of war. As a pilot, the king has an intimate understanding of just how quickly attacking Israeli jets could see his kingdom as little more than the shortest distance between 2 points on the map, between Iraq and Israel. One message in mosques around Jordan today was that people here are not about to tolerate Israel's use of Jordanian airspace. There are calls for support for Iraq and appeals for Jordanians to stand behind their army at this time of great tension. You know, in order to illustrate just how quickly things could happen in an air war here, from this rooftop in Amman, we have to consider that Jerusalem is only about 40 miles as the crow flies, or as the jet flies to the west, and the Iraqi border is only about 140 miles further to the east. In the cockpit of an attacking jet, we're really just talking about a few seconds. Back to you, Harry.
Doug, I know this is a difficult question to answer. Do you think the people in Jordan believe Israel will become involved, and if in fact they do become involved, they'll go ahead and use Jordanian airspace, which then of course thrust Jordan into this whole mess?
Well, you know, people here have had such tremendous experience with wars in the not-so-distant past that they realize how quickly things do get out of control in any kind of combat situation. And when we're talking about such short distances, a kingdom that is literally in between, there is great concern, and people do believe it's a very real possibility. The missile attack changed everything last night because, of course, that was what Saddam Hussein had been promising he was going to do all along. And it's clear, people here know that Saddam believes it's in his interest now to try to draw Israel into the war and to try to make it an Arab-Israeli war and not just Iraq against the world. I think we just can't understate how worried people here are of that prospect.
And how plugged in are people there in Jordan? We know, for instance, that the Israeli cabinet has met. We don't have word on what their decision has been, whether or not to go ahead and retaliate. Is news that current in Jordan? Will people know immediately what the news is and how desperate it may in fact be for them?
Well, ironically, a lot of people here get their news first off of Israel radio and TV. Jordanian TV, of course, keeps them up to date with their own government's deliberations. I think officials here, the Jordanian government, is very much up to speed with the development of events because of official and unofficial channels. They're always well informed. But for the general public, it's listening to foreign broadcasts and then going to the balcony and just seeing if anything's in the air.
Doug Tennell reporting this morning live from Amman, Jordan. Thank you.
And to get a better sense now of just what the impact of this Iraqi attack on Israel means, let's go to Representative Charles Schumer, who joined us this morning. He is a six-term congressman from Brooklyn, New York. He is a vocal supporter of Israel and voted against sending U.S. troops into battle. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. We are hearing our administration ask the Israelis to show restraint. We're hearing the British Foreign Secretary asking the same thing of Israel as the Allies try to eliminate the need for Israel to respond. How much pressure is there on Israel right now to not respond to this attack?
Well, there's tremendous pressure on Israel not to respond, and I guess many Israelis and many supporters of Israel here in America find that sort of ironic. A country that gave up its right to first strike willingly, a country that has been in a state of war with almost all of its surrounding neighbors, with the exception of Egypt, is being asked not to defend herself when the bottom line of Israel's 43 years of existence has been a knowledge of her enemies that she will respond, but because of the close alliance between America and Israel, the Israelis are weighing it very carefully.
What do you think is the appropriate reaction on, or what would be an appropriate reaction on Israel's
Israel
part?
certainly has a right to respond. Any nation that's attacked has a right to respond and defend herself. But I think Israel is mindful of all the various alliances, cross-cutting alliances here, and mindful of American support. And I think what will happen is whatever Israel will do, it will be in consultation with the United States. In other words, I doubt there would be a massive, massive retaliation, although it might very well be appropriate for Israel to have a retaliation that shows Saddam Hussein that every time he attacks Israel, he's going to be hurt back.
If the Israelis have to be mindful of what could undermine this brittle alliance we now have, do you subscribe to the view that they could launch a sanitized attack, which would be sending a missile over there and not sending a manned mission? Would that make any difference, do you think, to the coalition
Well,
partners?
I think the size of the attack makes the largest difference to the coalition. But I think you have to, well, the one thing we really do have to remember, Israel has been this country's ally for 43 years. She's been in a state of war. She was founded out of the ashes of the Holocaust, which many attribute to the fact that no one responded to what was happening in Europe till too late. And so there's a tremendous feeling in Israel that some attack is necessary. If Israel didn't attack, it would show remarkable restraint that I think just about no nation I know has shown in this kind of situation.
We know that Deputy Secretary of State Eagleberger met with Prime Minister Shamir last weekend, and they worked out some details of just how this would all work if Israel were to be attacked. Do we have any better idea now of just what kind of plan was set forth?
Well, Israel agreed, despite the fact that she didn't really, it wasn't her necessity to not go for a first strike. That meant she was willing to take a first hit, which she took last night, unfortunately, for the sake of the alliance. Israel did not agree, as no nation would in my judgment, to forego the right to retaliate if attacked. Even President Mubarak of Egypt had said Israel would have a right to respond.
But do you think there are parts of this plan?
But I do think whatever happens, there will be close consultation between America and Israel.
Thank you, Representative Schumer. Thanks for dropping in this morning. Okay.
We're going to take a break right now, but when we come back, we'll have the latest headlines as our continuous coverage of Operation Desert Storm continues.
Introducing Glade Plug-ins Air Freshener. It keeps
on freshening. And freshening.
And freshening. Plug it in, plug it in. New Glade plug-ins freshens for 30 days. Plug it in, plug it in. Gently, constantly warms this refill cartridge for a full 30 days.
Freshens 30 days, freshens out of your way. Plug it in, plug it in.
After 30 days, just pop in a refill. Try Glade plug-ins and plug into 30-day freshness.
Plug it in.
A night for Excedrin PM.
This was no day to be me.
It's mine!
Someone had to tell you.
Termites. They said no spouses, so
I can't sleep and my head aches.
You want more than just a pain reliever. You want Excedrin PM. Strong aspirin-free headache medicine plus a gentle second ingredient to help you sleep through the night for a fresh start tomorrow. Excedrin PM. Headache medicine, and it helps you sleep.
Static Cling can make you feel like this. What's your solution? Static Guard. Static Guard eliminates static cling instantly, completely. Get Static Guard. It's your best solution for static cling.
A sink isn't the only place Woolite cleans safely and gently. Use the delicate cycle, and a lot of your hand washing won't need your hands.
It's not simply a game. It's an era of fitness, health, muscle development, body toning, beauty, and power. It's the era of Solovex. Become a part of it. Call anytime for a free brochure.
We continue now with our continuous coverage of Operation Desert Storm, and here are the Persian Gulf War headlines. 2 more U.S. fighter jets are missing. The Israeli cabinet meets to consider a response to an Iraqi missile attack. The U.S. and Great Britain ask for Israeli restraint, and the U.S. commander of Operation Desert Storm will brief reporters in just about 15 minutes. U.S. losses in the Persian Gulf War are mounting, with word that 2 more jet fighters and their crews are missing. One is an Air Force F-15E Strike Eagle with 2 men on board. The other is a Navy A-6 Intruder. It also has a 2-man crew. The Israeli cabinet has concluded an emergency session called after 8 conventionally armed Iraqi Scud missiles struck Israeli civilian targets last night. Israeli jet fighters are patrolling the skies over Israel this morning, and U.S. and British officials call on Israel not to retaliate. There are unconfirmed reports that 8 Israeli jets are headed for Iraq. Meanwhile, the U.S. bomb and missile barrage against Iraqi targets continues, with more Tomahawk cruise missiles in action. Reuters reports that at least 2 of the Tomahawks hit the Iraqi city of Basra overnight, and Iranian officials say the shockwaves were felt across the border in Iran. In this country, the voices of protest continue to speak out at UCLA, where 300 to 400 students have seized control of one campus building. That's the headlines from around the world up to now. We've got more news, though.
Yesterday, we spent a lot of time talking about how the international financial markets were reacting to the first 24 hours of Operation Desert Storm. Let's go to Edie Magnus right now to see how different the news is today now that we have an attack on Israel.
Well, it seems to be a lot more cautious today. In the second day of Operation Desert Storm, the world financial markets actually are reacting very differently to the events in the Gulf, showing signs of varying confidence that the war against Saddam Hussein is going well. The London Stock Exchange is down 15 points today, and investors there keeping their fingers crossed.
Today we are probably priced for a very quick war. Everyone's looking for the result to come out in the next week to 10 days. This could be far too optimistic, and we could get into some serious trouble later on when we get into a land battle.
On the other hand, Iraq's missile attack on Israel caused only a minor jolt to the Tokyo financial markets today, which continue to rally based on an optimistic assessment of how things are going, closed up 1.5%. Japan is going to increase the amount it's contributing to the Gulf crisis. That announcement last night by Prime Minister Kaifu. No word on how much more Japan's going to add to the $2 billion it had pledged already. In his remarks, Kaifu said his country firmly supports the use of force by the multinational coalition, and he condemned the acts of Iraq as outrageous. The reaction, of course, from our U.S. allies to the Iraqi bombing of Israel came quickly and strongly, as you all have noted this morning. The French Foreign Ministry has condemned with greatest firmness the attack on Israel, and British Prime Minister John Major called the missile bombardment unforgivable. And then hours later, Foreign Secretary Douglas Hurd told the House of Commons that restraint on the part of Israel would be appreciated as a sign of strength and not weakness. Harry and Paula, it remains to be seen, of course, what the Israeli cabinet has concluded. It will be interesting to see if that unconfirmed report that you have, that 8 Israeli jets are headed toward Iraq, will eventually be confirmed.
We have a little bit more information on that right now.
We have now just received a report out of southern Lebanon that 2 groups of Israeli warplanes flew over southern Lebanon. It would be at about 10:25 their time. They were heading east towards Syria and Iraq. This according to the AFP local contact in southern Lebanon. This same source out of Israel citing unnamed political sources saying that the Israeli leadership has decided on a measured response. The literal French translation of that is a reflected upon response.
This is still not confirmed in any way, shape, or form, but we will continue to monitor this as best we can. People all over the country, especially those with loved ones who are involved in this fighting, are really under incredible amounts of stress, and among those are Rita Warren and Jennifer Warren, whose wife, whose husband, I guess, and father is a navigator on a C-130 that has been over in the Gulf for, what, over 5 months now. They join us this morning from Fort Bragg. How are you this morning, and how are you coping with all of this news as it's come your way?
Just fine, thank you. We're doing fine. We are taking each day as it comes, and when that's done, we go on to the next day and just wait to hear word from Bob that he's okay.
Yeah. Jennifer, did you go to school yesterday?
Oh yeah, I don't plan to miss any school unless something really happens to my dad and everything.
What was the atmosphere at school like? As so many of your classmates, I'm sure, have fathers and maybe even mothers who are serving over there. What was the mood like at school?
It was pretty normal, actually. I mean, we all miss them, but nobody's really crying and so emotional about it. They probably are very emotional, but not at school. It's like school is a normal place, somewhere that we could just continue our lives, not worry about Saudi Arabia, all that stuff.
Almost a safe haven, like.
Yes, yeah.
Rita, your husband works on a C-130, and that's a kind of a plane that is really sort of a transport aircraft. I guess at this point you're probably keeping your fingers crossed that that kind of aircraft isn't going to be deployed in this at least immediate action.
That's right. Basically what they will probably do is go in after the fact and remove cargo, anything that has to come out, or bring things in to resupply as it's necessary, and they'll be there until the job's done.
Do you keep the TV or radio on all the time? How do you go about your daily business over the last day and a half now that the fighting has started?
Basically, I turn on the TV in the morning to see what's occurred while I've been sleeping. I then go about my regular days, whatever activities I'm going to do that day. And then after that, in the evening, I'll turn it on, and unless something does come up, but I don't watch it 24 hours a day. I just can't do it. It's just not good for me. I just can't handle it that long. I just feel better just knowing it as something happens.
Yeah. We have just a couple of seconds left. We've been incredibly impressed with families, members of servicemen and women over there. How is it that you've all coped so well, and we don't have a lot of time left? You seem just incredibly well prepared for this.
We have a wonderful support group. I can call anybody, anytime, at Pope and our family at home, and it's just wonderful, and I know there's somebody always there for me.
Rita, Jennifer, our best to you this morning, and our thoughts and prayers will continue with you. Thanks for being with us this morning.
And our coverage of Operation Desert Storm continues right after this short break. Over the course of the last hour, you've heard Harry and me both mention that there are reports from the Agence French press that two groups of Israeli airplanes have flown over southern Lebanon, heading east towards Syria and Iraq. Right now we go to Mill McLaughlin, who's standing by in Israel to give us an update on that. Can you confirm that for us this morning?
No, Israeli planes are up in the sky, sure enough, and probably will be all day for one reason or another. Including taking pictures and doing recon work. An attack, quite unlikely at this time. From what we know about, given what we learned earlier this morning, what happens is the Iraqis only take their mobile missile launchers out of their hidden underground bunkers at night around, say, 6 or 7 p.m., which is 4 to 5 hours from now. Then they trundle off somewhere for a couple of hours, and it takes about 4 to 5 hours to prepare them and to sight them. That's why we had our attack here at our 2 a.m. So if there were to be an Israeli attack on those mobile launchers, it would come really in the time between 6 or 8 and 2 p.m. In other words, no sooner than 6 hours from now. So from what we know of the way this war is being fought, which may not be a heck of a lot, but from what we know, have learned to our cost, or almost to our cost, it's unlikely there's any Israeli attack going on right now. What is going on right now is a very, very serious and perhaps stormy debate within the Israeli inner cabinet to decide when, if, and how to revenge this morning's attack.
Bill, we have been reporting that cabinet meeting is actually over. Is that not true? Is it still going on?
There are two. See, in the Israeli scheme of things, there are several cabinets. So you've got the enlarged cabinet, you've got the war cabinet, you've got the inner cabinet. What now is just about 5 or 6 key men in Israel who are taking part in the final debate about what to do. Israel is a place where secrets are kept, and they're kept extremely well because only a few people get to know what's going on. And that's the way it works, and that's the way it's working right now. One clue, however, comes from Avi Posner, who is the Prime Minister's spokesman, and he said earlier today, Israel is prepared for the worst. And that means, I think, that Israel's political and military leaders do believe that the Iraqis are going to try and hit again tonight. And I think from what I'm hearing, that we can expect, if that happens, that Israel will respond and will respond in kind.
Yeah, in fact, that same French press agency report I mentioned a little bit earlier on is also saying that unnamed political sources in Israel say the Israeli leadership has, in fact, decided upon a measured response to this first strike. Can you help us along with that at all?
Well, no, I think what the Israelis are trying to work out with the United States is if the Iraqis attack again, as is expected, Israel will then strike. It can't really strike until the attack begins. The problem is this. The AWACS, our spy satellites, really cannot locate those mobile missile launchers until they have fired their missiles. And the missiles are fired simultaneously, even if it's from several different missile launchers. I think there were 2 used earlier this morning. When that happens, then the Israeli Air Force will know exactly where to strike. That would be the measured response, because in fact, the Israelis wouldn't go after Baghdad, they wouldn't go after civilian population centers. That would be sending the wrong signal. It would also be playing into Saddam Hussein's hands. What they would do is make a military surgical strike. So, what's the French report, I think, is just, it doesn't sound right.
We are trying to wade through all kinds of unconfirmed reports here this morning. Bill, one last question for you. Baghdad Radio is also reporting now that Israeli warplanes are flying to Saudi Arabia to join in the multinational force. Is that at all a possibility at all?
That's exactly what Baghdad would love the rest of the Arab world to believe. What's going on now is that the Iraqis are pretty desperate. American Air Force is a lot better than they had expected. Saddam Hussein is getting probably very, very nervous right now. His last best hope is to get demonstrations, riots, revolts going in the several Arab capitals, including especially those capitals which are supporting the United States, in Riyadh, in Jeddah, in Cairo, in Damascus. And you try and do that by spreading all kinds of rumors about Israeli, Arab, American close collaboration. But for the Saudis to acquiesce to that kind of move, absolutely not. It would be political suicide for the Saudis or for the Egyptians or for the Syrians. So that it's so far off the wall. It's
Bill McLaughlin, we're going to have to leave it there. Of course, we'll be checking in with you throughout the morning.
Our special coverage continues right after this.
This is CBS.
It's the January deduction sale at Beaman Toyota with deals like this 91 Corolla with automatic transmission, power steering, power brakes, air conditioning, and a lot more. With the Beaman price of $10,912, and folks, we've got 10 at this price. Or we've got 8 1990 Celicas that are Beaman priced as low as $12,722. It's deal after deal in January at Beaman Toyota, 1525 Broadway at West End.
Come back to the basics. Come home to Beaman.
We're still closing our doors on February 3rd. Bankruptcy Liquidators name brand athletic shoes start at $9.99 a pair. Special reduced prices on Nike, Reebok, LA Gear, and Converse. Low tops, none higher than $25. High tops, none higher than $35. We're still closing our doors on February 3rd. Bankruptcy Liquidators has reduced our men's dress, casual, and athletic shoe prices to only $9.99 a pair.
watching CBS News' continuing coverage of Showdown in the Gulf. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here are Harry Smith and Paula Zahn.
And good morning, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of CBS This Morning. CBS News coverage of the war in the Gulf continues. I'm Paula Zahn.
And I'm Harry Smith, and here are the headlines at this hour. The world awaits an Israeli response to an Iraqi missile attack last night. 2 more American planes are down in the Gulf War. The Allied assault on Iraq continues, and as the war goes on, so do the protests. Israeli fighter jets patrolled Israeli skies this morning after at least 8 Iraqi Scud missiles slammed into the Mediterranean coast. It is not yet known if the Israeli cabinet has ordered them to retaliate for the attack. But there is an unconfirmed report that 8 Israeli jets are already on their way to Iraq. A flight of jets was seen flying over southern Lebanon. The Scud missiles did not carry chemical weapons.